Alrighty. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Wayfarers Christian Church Deep Dive podcast. My name is Nick Griffin. I'm the lead pastor here at Wayfarers. If this is your first time tuning in, this is a podcast where we take deep dives on different topics. Usually that can be some of the topics that we've been talking about in our Sunday services. But here recently, we've been doing something really fun, which is taking a deep dive on people's stories. And we're calling it our Backstory series. That was a weird weird little hiccup there. You should keep that in, Noah. Don't cut that out. Weird little hiccup there, but we're doing people's backstories, and it's been really cool to get to know the backstories of different people at the church. And so we've been bringing different guests on. But first, I'm joined today by our usual hosts. We've got everybody's fan favorite over here, Ashley Wakefield.
Hello. Hey, everybody.
We've got our connections pastor here at the church, Jacob Dooley.
Hey, everybody.
Off screen currently is producing this podcast is our teaching pastor, Noah Randolph.
Hey, everybody.
You'll hear his voice, but you won't see him on screen because we just kind of ran out of seats around the table.
I like to think of him as a voice of God in the background.
Yeah. You know, you'll just hear him in the background there.
They put me in the doghouse.
If you see us like weirdly looking off camera, we're looking at Noah. He's talking. We wanted to give an opportunity to be able to ask some questions of our guest. And speaking of our guest, our special guest today, who you heard a short version of her story, is Karleigh Heath. What's up, Karleigh? Say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today.
I am very excited to have you on. It's weird. We've talked about this before with Karleigh. It's weird to have you on in some ways because we grew up in the same church together. We were both members of Eastwind Christian Church, now Oak Lane Christian Church, growing up. And I'm several years older than you, and so it's really funny because I remember when you were like super little, like basically baby toddler, and it is super weird for me experience to see you now here as a student at Mid-South. You've been helping us out at Wayfarers, singing with us on Sundays and doing all kinds of different things with us. And the interesting thing when you finally, it feels like there's like a second time when you meet somebody after they're an adult and you're not like just the little kid running around the church. And it feels like I'm getting to meet you for a second time these last few months, getting to know you. So for that reason, we thought it'd be really, really cool to bring you on the podcast just so we can do the deep dive on your story, get to know your story a little bit more, and I don't know, introduce you to everybody else here too.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm Karleigh, and I'm a student here at Mid-South, and I love it here. I actually didn't plan on coming to Mid-South, but my mom and dad kind of pushed me to it. You know, I kind of wanted to go to a bigger school so I could meet more people, but I've been here, and I've had so many really cool opportunities I probably wouldn't have gotten elsewhere, and so, yeah, I'm just happy to be here. And
that's awesome. I know it is weird. One of the weird things about such a small school is everybody knows everybody else, and everybody loves Karleigh. Everyone's always talking about her. So we're just going to jump right in, I guess, dive into your story. So we heard the short version of it there at the beginning, but you talked about that you were put up for adoption by your biological mother. So what was the story with her? You gave us the short version, but you said she was in a hospital. What was she in a hospital for at the time?
Yeah, and I don't know all the details really.
Sure.
My mom doesn't even know that much, but I just know she was in a hospital somewhere, and she was kind of, I don't know the word, bedridden.
Okay.
As if she was paralyzed from the waist down, so she couldn't get up, and she didn't really think right. She didn't think like the others. So she was a little bit, I guess you could say, slow.
Sure.
And so she just didn't really make decisions for herself, and so she actually had to have people come to her and help her and assist her with everything. And I don't know if it was doctors or, a patient or somebody, but somebody had to have come and, probably raped her. And so that's how I'm here. And, it's kind of hard because a lot of people don't really want to keep those babies who they see them as like, demon or like monster babies. I guess I've heard, not sure. But I mean, I kind of am like, dang, yeah, that's hard. And I don't even know what to say to those comments people make too, because I'm like, man, I don't even know what I would do. But now that I'm here, I'm like, I would definitely keep that baby. I would try my best to see through that. And
no, that's there's several layers to that, all kinds of different situations that I hear people bring up a lot of times when they're talking about those topics. And that's what's so cool about getting to meet actual people involved in these situations and not just talk about these ideas just as like weird abstract ideas. And so you said that she was your biological mother was in this hospital, had paralysis and maybe some mental issues and different things that was going on with her. And you said that the people at the hospital were kind of pushing her to have an abortion.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you had heard.
And my mom, she, I kind of asked her about that. My adoptive mom,
Right.
Lori, and she kind of just said that the hospital, they had a deadline, like you have to make a decision at this certain time, or it's just policy. That's it. We gotta make a decision for you because you don't have, I guess, a mind that can think on your own and raise a child. Like
Right.
we have to either give it to somebody here that can take care of her, or make a decision. But there was a deadline, and I think it was like 8 months in. I'm not sure the exact time, but they're
Right.
like, you have to make a decision now, or we're going to make a decision for you. And so she kind of just spoke up, and they couldn't really understand her. And she said, I want to keep her. And so they asked her what she wanted to name me. And it's actually Linda. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And, my mom actually had a twin sister. And so I think it's pretty cool that maybe down the line I'm able to have twins or something like that.
Sure, it might be in the genes there.
So have you ever, I guess outside of hearing this story about, the situation surrounding your birth from your foster parents, have you ever got a chance to speak to your biological mother?
No, I haven't.
Oh.
Neither
Right.
my mom or
So
anything.
that story was one you heard just secondhand from
from
your
my mom, and she kind of just told me everything she knew. But
that's really cool. It's really powerful. Like she was adamant. She's like, no, I want to keep her, and that's really cool. Because of that, you're here with us.
It's just crazy. Like just by that little chance, I got a chance in life. Just by that little. It was like almost deadline, and she was like, "No, man,
Right.
I want her."
And it's kind of like all the everything was stacked against her and you at that point in time.
And her physical ability is just like, you can't do that. Like, like just kind of putting her down, like,
right.
in a nice way. I'm sure the doctors were, but I think they were being realistic of like how she has to be.
It's illogical sometimes to continue on, but sometimes the most illogical things are some of the best things that we can decide to do.
I think something really cool. I don't mean to like take over this.
It's your story. Talk about however you want.
It's you.
Yeah, but the foster home, I talked about it a little bit in the short video. They actually live in Kansas. I think it's either Kansas or Kentucky. I don't know. They both start with Case.
Right. One of those case states.
Yeah, but I remember like just until maybe like 6 years, I was 6 years old, my mom and dad, we would always go down there, and I think my older brother Josh was with me, and we would just ride down there, and they loved me so much, and I actually got to be a part of their daughter's wedding.
Oh, wow.
So they had a daughter, and I don't know why, but I have like some memories of what it was like in the house.
Yeah.
And so they had a daughter and I think 3 sons, and they always kind of included me in everything and took really good care of me, which is also, a little bit by chance that I got that luck, because a lot of people get put into like really, really bad foster homes or even adoptive homes. And I just remember one of the brothers would play drums all the time. And that's just something in my mind that I remember. But I just remember I got really lucky.
Yeah. I had I guess a 2-part question. Because I know some people, adopt because they can't have kids, and some people have several kids and they just still want to adopt. That they have a specific reason why, if they had 4 kids, because you said they had 1 girl and 3 boys, why they wanted to like adopt? Was it just they just wanted to show love to another child who didn't have parents?
Well, this was the foster family, right?
Yes.
So you after you were born, you were placed temporarily with the foster family for a little while.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
before
yeah.
you got adopted.
Yeah.
Right, gotcha.
And so this foster family, they were the ones that had all the boys.
Mhm.
and
Oh,
the
okay,
girl.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they
Right.
were in like Kansas or Kentucky,
Mhm.
one of those
Oh,
K
nice.
states.
And so it's kind of crazy. Like my mom wanted to keep me, although she couldn't really keep me.
Right.
But she wanted me to have life,
Right.
you know, and she wanted me to be able to experience life.
Right.
So she still gave me a chance to, you know, even if she didn't get to raise me, that I got to go somewhere else and, you know, experience this life we have
Yeah.
here.
And like you said, that is really cool that you're right. We've all probably heard stories of people who've had bad experiences in that in between foster system. So
Mhm.
the fact that not only did you go to a good foster family, but that they were like obviously cared about you so much that they kept in touch with you for years afterwards, and you were even in the daughter's wedding. So,
and my mom
that is
might
really
even
cool.
be like, my adopted mom, she'd be like, no, it was the son's wedding. I don't know. It was either the sons or the daughters, but it doesn't matter. I was in.
Yeah, Lori might correct a few of these
Yeah.
stories, but she was in somebody's wedding
Yeah.
from the foster family.
Yeah.
So you were there for a few years, and then you mentioned you have a few memories of that. You remember one of the brothers played drums all the
Mhm.
time. Do you
Yeah.
have any other memories from that time that you remember?
Not really. I could just kind of remember a little bit of just kind of
Mhm.
like how loved I was and just like how sweet they were and kind. And I
Yeah.
just remember how, like, even my mom and dad now that I don't even understand how they love me when I'm not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just cool that like that foster family, like they just treated me as if I was their own, which I thought was incredible. And I just remember just always going places with them a little bit and just like
Yeah.
really fitting in. And I just always forget what color I am. And like, because I've always been with like, you know, white families and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'll walk into a store and people will just give me the weirdest looks. And I like, oh yeah, my mom is white. And then I'll see another family and they'll probably have, you know, a black child and the mom be white. I'm like, that's a little bit different. But then I remember I'm the same.
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask you about that, about the difference in the race. Like, did it ever stir up any problems? Not in the home, but like just outside the home, like with school or stuff like that. Like people thought it was weird, or you had to explain yourself a lot, or
Honestly, people thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, okay,
like I was
cool.
kind of the cool kid because I had a, you know,
Yeah.
I have a white mom, and they're like, "Ooh, that's kind of cool." Like I would fit in with both, I guess, of the groups of like, you know, African Americans and whites, because I would, you know, kind of know because I've been around a lot of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And so you got a unique experience with that foster family.
yeah.
So you have a few memories of that time, but then do you remember the first time meeting your parents, meeting Jimmy and Lori?
But a cool story is that before my mom and dad my adopted parents ever got to meet me, the Bells, you know, I don't know if the audience knows who they are, but they actually attend Oak Lane, and Joy Bell and Tim, they were in a restaurant, and I was with my foster family, and they actually saw me across the room before my parents ever got the chance to
That's
see
really
me.
cool. And yeah, the Bells are really awesome longtime members of Oak Lane, and basically like
Family.
family to you.
Family.
And so that's really cool. They even before your parents met you, they
Yeah.
had met you at a restaurant there
And my
too.
dad always jokes and calls me Karleigh Bell because I'm always with them and family trips. And
I didn't know that. That is really cool.
so do you still keep in contact with the foster families you were with?
no, I haven't. But I remember like a few years ago, my mom was like, "We need to go meet them and see how they're doing."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we just haven't. We just kind of, you know,
well,
lost touch.
maybe we'll do an update story whenever
Yes.
you get a chance to hang out with them again. So you don't remember the moment exactly, but your parents went through the adoption process to get you out of the foster system and adopt you. Have you talked to them about what that process was like? Was it difficult for them? Do you remember them having a lot of obstacles to try to adopt you? Because I've heard that before with a few people, of a lot of hurdles to overcome in adoption.
Yeah, well, it was just such a long process, you
Mm.
know, a lot of court visits and a lot of papers that needed to be signed, a lot of money that went into it. I didn't talk to him a lot about, you know, the details of that process,
Right.
but I just know like it wasn't like, you know, oh, we see her, we want her to take her home, like you do a puppy or anything, but no, it's just a long process.
I've heard it takes a long time and a lot of money. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people don't understand how difficult that is. Have your going back to Ashley's questions, have your parents ever talked much about why they were looking at adoption at the time? Why it was so important to them to maybe look for kids to adopt?
Well, it's kind of cool. I think my parents tried to have kids, but they never could. And so I think they just kind of prayed about it. And they kind of heard from other people in the church about, like, it's kind of cool because there's a lot of people in our church that have, kind of moved on, but they actually have kids that are adopted. And so I think, I don't know who the first family was, but they probably got, a little bit of influence from them. And they're like, we really want a baby girl, or, or whoever. We just want to help out, and give somebody a good life. And so I think that's just kind of what drove them to that.
It is kind of cool. You're right. I've never thought about it. I'm just thinking through it. There's a lot of kids at our home church growing up that were adopted. And that is always a really cool thing. I've mentioned it in a few sermons before, but with the first kind of early Christians was the first time you got a lot of the kind of culture of adoption, even like being a thing in the world. Like people adopted kids before Christianity, but once those Christians in the first 100 years started really noticing all these like kids that were orphans and noticed how important orphans are to God, they were just like making it a really big point to adopt children. I read this really interesting story about how in like the Roman culture, it was like super common if you didn't want a kid, you would just take the baby and set him outside on the doorstep of your house or someone else's house.
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But the horrible thing is they would just let the kids like starve to death or die in the elements or whatever. And in their mind, that was fine because like they weren't killing the kid. It was like the weather or animals or the gods is basically what they said. It's the gods that were killing the children. And so every so often people who didn't want babies that they would have, they would just set them out on doorsteps. And the Christians started just going around cities picking up all the babies from the doorsteps and taking them to these orphanages to raise them. And so eventually the other like pagans just got tired of having that extra step and just started taking the babies directly to the doorsteps of the Christians and just leaving them. And that's kind of apparently where that whole tradition of like leaving babies out on doorstep,
I did not know that.
kind of Harry Potter
crazy.
style. Apparently that came from the fact that basically all these Christians are just like, no, we're not going to let that happen.
It's kind of cool that like they became known for that a little bit,
Yeah.
Like the whole city knew if you had a baby and you didn't want them, just take them to the Christians. They'll take them.
Yeah.
And so, I think it is kind of cool that at least in our home church growing up, that was part of our culture there too. Yeah. And so you think some of those people maybe encourage your parents to look into adoption, and they went through that whole process to adopt you and your brother and sister as well, right?
Yes, they're adopted.
So that's really cool that you guys have that. That kind of whole family.
Speaking of the process of adopting, I know you said that your biological mom wanted to name you Linda. Was there like a name change? Like, was there like a reason for the name change, like Karleigh? Because I don't know if people still call you Linda or not. I just wanted there
it's
was
like your middle name, Linda, or something.
Yeah, I have no clue, honestly. They just were like, I don't know, I guess they just like the name Karleigh, and they were like, that just seems very sophisticated, Linda. And I just can't really see,
Seems like a middle-aged lady named Linda.
No offense to any Lindas out there. I'm just saying.
No offense to any Lindas out there. And so they decided on the name change, to go with Karleigh.
And I remember my older brother Josh was my mom's first son. She was married before my dad, and she had Josh. It's kind of cool. He kind of came up with that name too, and he was like, Olivia. And they're like, no, we kind of like that. We're probably gonna go with it, but And then he said Karleigh, and it just kind of clicked for them, and they were just, so they just came up with a lot of names, and we're like, I really like that.
So Josh is responsible for the name Karleigh a little bit.
Good.
And my dad, I think he kind of helped him with it too. So
that's pretty cool.
Okay.
I had not heard that part of this.
So you have like one adopted brother and one adopted sister?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And then an older brother who's my mom's biological son, my adoptive mom.
Right.
Okay.
And then she adopted two others who they're brothers and sisters, but they have the
okay.
same mom but different dads. So yeah,
Okay.
and he's
So
like
it's
30. He's
Oh, yeah, he's
super old,
wild.
like 30, like me. And
super young.
so, what? I assume, did you grow up knowing that part of your story, knowing that you had been adopted and everything else, or was that something you learned later on when you were older?
I think it was something. I mean, I think I remember this one time. You know, as I said, we have a lot of kids in my church who are adopted, and there was, you know, Emily McKay. I was actually in my room, and we were like 6 years old and stuff like that. And Miss Mary, she didn't tell Emily yet that she was adopted, and I didn't know at the time. I don't think either. I thought my parents just, you know, had me or whatever because my dad's
Right.
black. But
Right.
no. So I go, Emily, you're adopted, and she just starts crying,
Oh,
and she
no.
goes running, and I just like ruined this whole thing because Miss Mary didn't tell her yet, and I felt terrible and stuff like that. And they were like, yeah, we were gonna tell her later, but you know, whatever. So they kind of used that against me. So it's just kind of funny.
I remember hearing about that. I
Really? Did you
remember
hear
somebody was
about
like, "Did you hear that Karleigh
Yeah.
told Emily she was adopted?" And it was
It was a big thing.
it was a whole thing. But
Yeah.
like you said, you're like, "No, well, my dad's black, so I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe it is biological."
Yeah, I think that's what I thought. I can't really remember the exact time, but I think that's what I kind of assumed. And they're like, "No, girl, you ain't mine."
You ain't mine. So your your adoptive dad was black, but your adoptive mom is white. Is that?
Yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And I know that's always. We might just have to bring your parents on at some point. They have a really funny story about moving to
that'd be
Memphis
awesome.
and realizing how racially divided Memphis is compared to other places they've been in.
Oh yeah.
And
they
they
get
were-
some weird looks.
They were going to different churches.
Oh, yeah.
And they would go to certain churches and everybody would be black. And they would look at them and look at your mom as like the only white person. And then they would go to a white church and they'd look at your dad as like the only black
Yeah.
person. And they
Welcome
were,
to the South.
right. had not encountered some of that weirdness about that.
My
until
dad
they
was
moved
the
here to
first
Memphis.
black guy, I think, at Eastwind,
Mhm.
and so he's still, you know,
He owns it for sure.
Yeah.
And so that was something you discovered later on, like in your life. Maybe you don't really remember exactly if your parents had told you or
Yeah.
not, but over time you learned about your adoption story and some of the various different things like that. Do you remember? Like, obviously that's like really, really cool. And we all think it's like a really cool aspect of your story. Do you remember feeling that way always? Or were there times in your life where it was something that like you wished had been different or just different things like that? Or have you always just been like, no, this is a really cool aspect of my backstory?
I guess it's been a lot. I mean, like my emotions have always been like, man, it would be cool to like get to know my biological mom and dad, but also like just so thankful like to have, you know, my adopted parents because they're so good to me and stuff like that. So it's just been like a mixture of feelings of like, wow, not feeling wanted. You know, I didn't feel, you know, since my mom, you know, it's crazy that she said she wanted me.
Yeah.
But because I was put in adoption, I kind of had those feelings in my mind that I wasn't wanted. I wasn't wanted by my mom, you know, and I wasn't wanted by my dad. And so I've always, and that's gone into like, you know, friendships and also people happen to reassure me that, no, you're wanted here. No, you know, I love you and stuff like that. And so a lot of times it's kind of trickled into my relationships and stuff like that. And my friend's mom actually knew kind of a little bit of my adoption story. And she reminded my other friend when we were having friendship problems of just like, hey, you know, maybe she doesn't feel wanted, you know, maybe it's because of this that happened. And so it's just like, man, that's probably true, you know. And so I've kind of seen that a little bit.
Yeah, that's always been something kind of in the back of your mind. But I have heard that from other kids who've been adopted, is that one of the cool parts about that is that you know 100% that your parents wanted you around. Like, I know a lot of kids who grew up in biological families that their parents just kind of act like they got stuck with them or something like that. And that's the cool thing about knowing that they wanted you as a part of their family. So you've talked a little bit about growing up in in Eastwind Christian Church at the time, and your family being heavily involved there. Your dad was the first black member at Eastwind Christian Church. You kind of grew up in the church. Do you ever? What are your earliest memories kind of church? Do you always remember having positive experiences with church or negative, or with the church specifically? How did you feel growing up in the church?
I felt incredibly loved just by everybody. From the start of me just being introduced to Eastwind, the reason why it took forever for me to learn how to walk, my dad said, is because everybody always had me on their hip.
There were plenty of people to carry you.
And so I just got passed around it. So I've always felt super loved and super cared for there. And that's why I've never left. I just love it so much there. Oh, my nose hit. But I also, I've been there forever, for 21 years. And so I've had my moments of where I've kind of turned away from it, not leaving the church, because my mom and dad always were adamant about me going. But I've also gone my own way a few times and occasionally and gone off.
And we should mention your mom works at the church.
Oh, yeah.
Your mom's the director of the children's ministry there at Eastwind. So did you ever feel like extra pressure? Did you feel like other people were like, you're Lori's kid, you got to be like extra good? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, him and I had so many conversations about this, of him feeling the exact same way. Because yes, although I felt loved and cared for, there were a lot of times where I was put on a pedestal of having of really high expectations of girl, it doesn't matter that everybody else is on their phone texting Billy Joe, but because your mom's a children's minister, I'm going to make sure I tell her about that. Yeah. And so there was a lot of moments where I was kind of secluded, but I think it really kind of made me who I am today, of just being held accountable, for things. Nothing I ever did was really bad, but I was a really big goofball in youth group, and Jeremy had plenty of sit-down conversations of love you, dude, but you gotta get your act together. So there was a lot of times like that where as I got older, I was like, okay, my mom works here and I want to represent her well, so I need to, chill out. Yeah. But there were a lot of times where I was held to really high expectations of So
did that play a part in why you turned away a little bit, the pressure you had, or did that kind of also go back to what you were saying before about wanting to feel wanted? Because I know you said you were really loved by everyone at the church. Was it just certain people or groups or anything like that played a part in turning away? Or?
Yeah, I guess I was were you going to say something? Sorry. Okay. I guess I was always seen as the church girl, and whenever I went to high school, they always had that perception of me because I was so different from everybody, the way I talked and how I lived and how I loved people. I was different. They knew I was a Christian, and so I guess I wanted to be seen as the cool Karleigh, and so I would go to I would want to go to all the parties. In my freshman year of high school, I went to every single party on Saturday because I wanted them to know that church girls can party too, and so I would just go do that, and it started just walking the line of just me going to parties, but then me starting to get involved with the things that they were doing, and so it's just that, and I was just I got kind of burned out of church after a while because I always was required to go every single time the doors open and just helping with connect sheets and just everything around from the smallest thing to the biggest thing. So I guess I just kind of was oh man, this is getting old.
Oh, yeah. So was it I know you brought this up. So was it your desire to make sure that you represented your mom and I guess your parents well that made you want to come back, or was it just a personal thing that you had?
Well, I guess at CIY, I was really moved every time we would go to CIY, and there was one year in 2017.
Which is, just for the listeners, CIY is a youth conference. Stands for Christ in Youth.
Okay.
Really cool summer conference. It's a week-long thing. You come, and they worship and really good speaking and all kinds of games and fun stuff for youth to be a part of. Yeah. And so our church grew up going to CIY every summer. It was the peak of the summer for all the high schoolers especially. So you were going to CIY.
Yeah, I was going to CIY. I think it was 2017, and I was just really like every year I felt so moved by it. But this particular year, I was like, man, I want to be a part of what they're doing. Like I want to go into ministry, and I want to devote my whole life to this. And so I was like, just that, and just like wanted to be a part of it. And I knew that if I was going to be a part of it, like I had to be different, and I had to live differently, and I wanted everybody around me to see that I was different, that I was changed.
That's really cool. Yeah. Do you remember how old you were? At that particular CIY?
17. So it's cool. Okay. Like every single year, like this year I'm 21, and so like whatever year it is.
Yeah.
that's kind of like so.
Yeah. So you were 17.
Easy to remember.
Yep.
Yeah, lines up with the year. You were 17. You went to the CIY and you felt a real calling to like really get serious about this stuff, go into ministry, and be kind of serious about changing your life. I wonder if I could get you to tell us a little bit too about. I know you just got the opportunity to go back to our home church and do teaching for their youth group. You told a story that I got to hear a little bit during that time where you were talking about a friend of yours who kind of asked you if you were like gave you kind of a fork in the road decision. Can you tell us about that time a little bit? And I'm curious, where did that line up with the timeline of CIY and all that other stuff?
Yeah, it's like that year, 2017, I decided to follow Jesus. And although I did when I was 8 years old, only because I wanted to take the communion cracker.
Yeah.
And so, I finally made that decision of my own life of like wanting to look like Jesus. And so, but I've always like had trouble with staying on that path and staying on that line. And so he kind of knew a lot about me and a lot of the things that I've done, and a lot of things that, stuff like that. And he was like, I want you to be, like he was kind of like pushing me to kind of be who he was, because he wanted me to be myself, because for my whole life I've kind of had people tell me who I am and tell me, this is where you're supposed to be, and kind of go into ministry and do this. And they saw my skills and my talents. And so they kind of pushed me to do that. So I kind of always felt like that, but I never truly was myself, only around my friends. And so he kind of knew that. And he kind of was just like, are you going to chase after God, or are you going to chase after worldly things? But you can't do both. Like you have to decide who you are. And that's your decision. And so that was kind of like what my lesson was based on.
Yeah.
And that's a constant question that I have to ask myself.
So this was a friend of yours from school, or just somebody you knew, or just another friend that you had?
Just a friend, yeah.
Yeah. And you were, what was interesting is you were saying this friend, he knew, that you had all of these aspects to your life, and a lot of people were kind of like trying to pressure you.
Yeah.
And he kind of gave you like a moment where he's like, hey, you got to decide one or the other.
And it's crazy because he knew the church knew that angel side of me of like, man, Karleigh, she's so sweet,
Right.
But he knew the other side of me, the worldly side,
right?
The things that I would do, that nobody else knew,
right?
And stuff like that. And
that I thought it was really interesting and really cool in a way that he knew that you can't try to do both. You gotta kind of pick one way or the other. Because you said he's not necessarily wasn't somebody that was a Christian, or wasn't some like church person telling you gotta follow Jesus. You can't do all this.
He
stuff.
was hoping I would choose the worldly things and be more like him, and so we could do all that stuff together.
I think that's such a powerful thing, that somebody who isn't even, I don't know what to say, who wasn't a Christian, but somebody who, I don't even know how to word it, not a Christian, not dedicated to the faith, but somebody who was living in the world, even they understand that you can't live a double life. And it's like, if they understand that, how come we can't understand that?
I was blown away by that too.
Yeah.
I was just like, man.
And so in that moment, you said in your teaching that you decided that you were going to, go all in and choose to follow God. And so I guess I'm curious, was that a similar time to your decision of deciding at CIY to go into ministry and all that kind of stuff, or was there some separation between those?
I guess there was like separation between those. Like it was like still, I was on the edge and on the fence, and I've been on the fence for a while, and I still, it just depends, I guess, who I hang around. Is because, like back, Jesus would always hang out with the sinners, and that was what I was wanting to do, as a leader, to be with those people, because I was always in the church, and so I had a lot of like just Christian people,
Right.
And so I would go out and hang out with non-believers, but then those non-believers started bringing me into what they were doing, and so I was like, man, like, how did Jesus do that? Like, how did he, hang out with them but not submerge himself too deeply into, doing the things that they do? And so that's always been a struggle for me, because I guess I'm strong in my faith, but it's still so hard.
Still tough.
Yeah, I heard somebody give an answer to that, and I don't know if I can't remember if it was my pastor or somebody else, and he actually brought up that issue of like, how exactly did Jesus go about hanging out with other people? And I think it was either him or someone else who brought up the answer to that was that he never hung out with them alone. Like, he always had somebody with him that would, so it was kind of like when Jesus was sending the disciples out, he sent them out in pairs of twos. He didn't send them out alone, so somebody was always with Jesus who was like him, of the same faith, so that we can hold each other accountable. And I was like, that's a really good point.
That is. I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Noah and I just a few days ago were talking about a similar topic. Noah, you want to give us like the quick version of what you were listening to on that? Was it a book you were reading or podcast you were listening to that was kind of critiquing some of the idea that you can hang out with the world and not be influenced by it?
I'm trying to remember what instance you're referring to.
You were talking about how Leslie Newbegin is wrong.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That now I do. That was very vague. Sorry. So one of the interesting things that I've been researching lately has been just how culture intersects with Christianity, and in particular because there is that divide between how the world lives and how Christians live. And there's this really interesting guy that everyone should go check out. He has this podcast called This Cultural Moment, which is done by this guy named John Mark Comer. And John Mark Comer is really interesting. He has a very interesting story that you can go and research on his site and stuff. But in a podcast that he does, he talks about how there is this interesting belief that kind of started with Leslie Newbegin, who Nick mentioned, who is this missionary that went over to India during like the 40s and 50s, and spent like a long time in India ministering overseas, and then came back after his mission journey to Britain, where he lived. And he describes that coming back to Britain as like a wake-up call for him, because when he had left Britain, it was Christian. And then when he came back after 40 years of missionary work in India, it was post-Christian, and Britain was no longer really ascribed to God anymore. And so he tried to think about how can Christians sort of reclaim a post-Christian culture that Britain had become when he came back. And so he argued that you should like go in bars, you should basically go out into the world and be a missionary in your everyday life, essentially, and you should try and minister as much as possible and hang out with all these non-Christian friends all the time, because basically your home is now the new mission field. And that's kind of his point. John Mark Comer ended up critiquing that view quite a bit by saying that what he has found is that when Christians do that and they go out into these bars and different places and hang out with non-Christians, oftentimes they end up becoming converted themselves and not necessarily converting non-Christians, but end up actually being pulled into that type of living or whatever. So I think that's what you're mentioning, Nick. It wasn't a book, it was a podcast, but yeah.
I couldn't remember exactly what it was. But yeah, there's a little plug for you guys. Check out, what'd you say it was called? This Cultural Moment?
This Cultural Moment.
We have a plug for everything. We'll figure it out.
We're always trying to get you guys other really cool resources. And that, I did think that is an interesting point. Because I myself have struggled with that sometimes, back and forth about like knowing, you've got a lot of friends that aren't believers, and you want them to come to know Jesus, and you want them to come be a part of the kingdom of God, so you want to go out and help them. but it's difficult to know how can I reach out to them without having their way of living kind of end up impacting what I do.
Yeah.
And I like that. That's a really practical answer, Ashley. One way you can do that is make sure you always keep other brothers and sisters, faithful
So
Christians
just
around with you.
go as a group. Don't go alone.
Accountability.
Double date.
Yeah.
And so like you said, you felt that pressure throughout your life, Karleigh, you know, back and forth. You want to make this impact, but there's been times when sometimes you've probably been better than other times about
I mean, worldly things are fun, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
but they don't last long, you know.
Right.
It's just for the moment. They're just kind of entice you, and you're like, oh man, this is awesome. Then you get back into the real world and be like, there's a lot more to life than this, and you know, I have eternity ahead of me. What do I want to choose?
Yeah.
I want to kind of return to your theme of adoption for a second, because I'm curious how being adopted and being in a church, how has that influenced your life in church, and specifically, like, what I mean by that is, like, I know there's a huge emphasis in church on family, you know, and the sense of, like, family get-togethers and family events and things like that. Did you ever feel like that was something that you could get into because you were adopted, or what was that kind of like for you growing up? Because I don't know, I could just imagine that part of church is really sometimes can feel negative, even if you don't have a good family, or, you know, if you have some of those story moments in your life that are different than sort of the narrative that, you know, it's like a happy husband and wife and kids and a white picket fence kind of American dream, so to speak. So maybe just speak about that a little bit.
I guess like my mom and dad, my adoptive parents, who are my mom and dad, and I don't like how you say that, but yeah, they're more my mom and dad than anybody has ever been. But they've always made me feel super loved, you know, and so, like, even if like family and all that stuff, like, I never feel out of place in that sense of, like, you know, like, oh man, like, I don't have that same life as the others do. I mean, I guess if I think deeper, but like, my mom and dad have always made me feel like I was one of their own. I forget that I'm adopted sometimes.
Yeah,
oh, that's good.
Oh, yeah.
There was no question in your mind as to whether you guys were a real family or not, because you knew from the whole time that you were. Because I hear what you're saying, Noah. Sometimes that can. There's a lot of churches that mean really good things and talk about really good things, but don't realize that they may be alienating some people in their own congregations by doing that. So, you decide you want to follow Jesus. You want to choose Him. You want to choose God over the things of the world. You decide at CIY that you're wanting to get involved in ministry. You talked about originally you wanted to go to a bigger school, more opportunity to make more friends and meet more people and different things like that. But obviously you didn't do that. You ended up here at Mid-South Christian College, whose campus we're using to stream this from. How did that decision come up? And the second question, so one, how did you decide to come to Mid-South? And two, how did your school friends and different people that you knew feel about that whenever they found out you were coming to a Bible college?
Yeah, I mean, so before all of this, like, I think it was another time at CIY, another year, probably 2018 or 2019, whatever the year before I went into my freshman year at Mid-South. I really wanted to, you know, devote my life, and so the next step would be, you know, change my life and change the ways of who I am, but also, like, going to a Christian school and studying the Bible and all of that, so I could, because I wanted to be a speaker, and I looked up to Sadie Robertson so much. I'm sure a lot of you know that, but yeah, so I went to a lot of her conferences, and I just really just wanted to do that exact thing. And stuff like that. And I went here, and my mom was like, there's no way I'm coming here, you know? And so my mom and dad would just think about it, you know, or whatever. And so they just really, really pushed me. And in that first week I was here, I was like, I don't know if I want to be here. I don't want to be here. I really want to go to Johnson University or, you know, that school, and they're like, come on, like, just try it out or whatever. And I always trust them. I was just like with the clarinet, and being in band. I really didn't want to do band, but then I did it, and it was like one of the best things ever.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just trusted them, and I just kept pushing forward. Then I did it, and I was like, okay, first year was amazing. I loved it, and it just got better and better and better. And I'm just like, wow, thank you. And there are still some like doubts of like, man, I kind of wish I went to, another college, where I could have met more people. But then I talked to a lot of my friends that go to that college, and they feel just as lonely there because there's like, 25,000 people, and they feel just as much alone as I do. And so it's just crazy to think, it doesn't matter where I am, that feeling can always creep in on you. So it's just like, wow, it doesn't matter who's there. But I'm glad I'm around these, like, Jacob and all these people here that kind of make me feel like I have a purpose. Because if I was at one of those schools, I feel like I would have struggled with what my purpose was and why I'm here. And, thoughts would have got deeper and deeper. But, whenever I kind of got scared to tell my friends where I was going because I felt like such a hypocrite after all the things that I've done and stuff like that. And they kind of knew that I was a Christian, but I really was like a really like big, like lukewarm Christian.
Right.
Like I was just, saying, oh yeah, Jesus is good and all that stuff. And then like the weekends would be no reflection of all the things I would be saying during the week and what I would do on Sundays. And so they were just kind of, blown away by that and didn't really understand it. But they kind of knew that I was a bit different and that I might get on track soon. But I don't think that's what they were really hoping me to do. And so they just didn't understand, like, why would you want to devote your life to that? Like, that's, you're not going to make any money. You're going to not be able to do all these things we're doing and stuff like that. Like, think about this, think about that. But, yeah, I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, I found that out, too, is that I think people who live in, I don't know if I want to call this secular world, people who don't live spiritually, they don't pursue purpose. They just kind of pursue career and money. Because I had somebody else in my, not family, he's a family friend who asked me the same thing. Like, well, if you're pursuing a Christian education degree, how are you going to make money? And it's like, well, we're not pursuing money. We're pursuing purpose. There's a difference between those two things. So,
yeah.
I feel like that's a connection. I also got asked, you're like, why are you switching colleges to go to some small Bible school? You're not going to make any money when you graduate.
Yeah. And what was your answer?
Pretty similar as like, well, I'm going into preaching. I don't expect to make a bunch of money. I know that before I'm going into it.
And see, my answer to that was that I basically said that I'm pursuing purpose. I'm not pursuing money. And I said that if I'm doing what God is calling me to do, then God is going to let the money come because that's where the money is connected to. It's not connected to the title or the degree. Is connected to me following the purpose because God has money laid up there for me. And he really changed his attitude. He was like, I can give you my number and you can call me if you need anything. I was scared, like, okay.
It's like, okay, I could see that. No, that's a really cool way to talk about it. It's just like, having a purpose behind our lives, having meaning for the things that we're doing.
I wish I had
really
had that great of an answer when I was asked the question.
Yeah, and I was at youth group this Wednesday, and I just had a great time. But I showed them this Francis Chan video, and I showed them the rope thing, and about how there's this little red part that Francis Chan, he says, we try to do this so we can get to this and get enough money just so at this very end of our life we can have fun at this part. And so I was like, but we have all of that that rest of eternity waiting for us. And so like we're just chasing after things that are just gonna be gone when we die. Like, what's the point of that? Like, I want to chase after God and his people, and I want to bring them to the heart of God.
So I'm curious, do you think that with Christianity in particular, do you feel like there's this living the 70 years of life that you don't get what you want at all? Do you feel like your desires for the 70 years of life are always to be resisted and that you just have to do things you don't want to do for the 70 years of life? Or do you feel like there is some like middle ground, so to speak, in where you can do what you want to do, but also for God?
You talked about how like living in the world can be kind of fun sometimes. So it's not, I guess a part of what Noah's asking is like, is living the Christian life all about just giving up on everything fun or anything that's exciting? Has that been your experience, or do you feel like there's been some benefits to the now, not just sometime later in heaven that you get?
Yeah, and that's what my friend talked to me about, of like, you know, like Christianity is just a bunch of rules. There's no fun. All you guys do is this, and this. And I'm like, but there's so much more beauty to life when we obey what God says, you know, and stuff like that. And I feel like coming to Mid-South and being here, I've also found my purpose of who I am. And I've had like some really like dark thoughts and felt like, you know, maybe I'm better off not here and stuff like that. And I feel like being here, people have really poured love into me as well. And so like I've found so many talents that I have of like singing. I love to sing, and that just brings me so much happiness. And so I feel like Christianity, you find yourself, and you're like, you know, you find what you're good at, and you just kind of use that to glorify God, and it just brings you so much happiness.
Yeah.
And that's what it's
so
brought me.
you feel like you have more meaning and purpose in it than you would have. Yeah, you actually said something in your lesson that you were giving for youth group this last Wednesday, where you talked about how, in your experience, a lot of people in the world are actually struggling with an identity. Like, they just don't really have an identity. They're just kind of doing what other people want them to do.
Yeah.
You know,
I've talked to so many people, because as I said, like I have so many non-Christian friends and stuff like that, and they just feel so just lost in this world, and like there's no reason for life, and like they don't want to be here and all that stuff. And I just feel like, man, if I would be in that same position, if I, you know, pursued, you know, worldly things, I still do occasionally, but like, just like if I was in, you know, at their school, and if I didn't go here, and if I didn't choose God. And so it's like kind of crazy to me, like, you know, but I know the key, you know, like I have the key, and it's just like, Jesus is just incredible, and I wouldn't be anywhere without him.
Yeah. I think
that's awesome.
Yeah, because I think that kind of goes back to not having fun in the real world. Because I mean, we've all been there where we've been living like that, and we have fun in the moment, but then afterwards it produces a lot of pain, because I know that I've been there. And I feel like that the joy that we have here is like a wholesomeness kind of joy, where you can still have fun, but it doesn't hurt you after you do it.
It's still fun the next morning.
Yeah, it's still fun. It's still fun the next morning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I feel this way every time with our episodes, but we're running close to the end of our time here. I know there's all kinds of different things we could talk about in your story, but I'm curious if there is, maybe for any of y'all, if there's any last questions you might have wanted to ask Karleigh.
Yeah, I did have one. So I know that since, you know, you have a big story with adoption, have you ever considered, like, maybe when you got older or when you got married or didn't, did you ever want to adopt a child?
I don't really like kids.
Karleigh's
That's
like, I don't want any
hilarious.
kids.
That's hilarious.
I like youth age kids, honestly, because I like.
That was not what I expected her to say.
Hey, let me tell you from my personal experience, I always told people I was never going to have kids because I don't like kids, and I've been like a middle-aged man from the time I was 12. So
It's true.
yeah. So I never wanted kids, but
Hello, Toby.
yeah, I it's crazy how much that'll change over time. So I don't know. You might change your mind, but
yeah,
that's great.
I don't really have a sweet answer, because I feel like if I did, like, I would probably want to have my own kid, because I would want like a kid to look like me. So
Yeah.
But then I also thought about adoption too, of like how my parents saved my life. And so then I thought about, you know, maybe not adopting like a baby, but it would be cool to adopt somebody that's like 12 or 13 that usually doesn't have a chance and like a good, you know, life, because nobody
That's
really
huge.
wants. It's kind of like puppies. Like everybody wants the puppy, but nobody really wants the
older
dog.
dogs. Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, maybe that. But I really don't know. I just kind of go with the flow.
Hey,
Haven't
that's
really thought
fine.
about that.
You got time to figure that out.
Yeah.
But that's funny. I also did not expect that.
I completely expected that answer.
Jacob's like, I know Karleigh well enough. I knew what she was going
knows
to say. So do you have any other things you wanted to end with, Karleigh, or any other aspects of your story you want to make sure you shared with us before we finish up?
I think I hit everything. I think, you know,
Cool.
probably if we had 30 more minutes, I could have expanded, but
Maybe not 3 more minutes.
I think, yeah.
Cool.
I love the picture that your family is made up of people that are adopted, people that were born into it. And it's, to me, it's a beautiful picture. The love that y'all have is the family that God presents in Scripture. Adopted. We're not born into Christianity, but we're adopted. We're brought in. We're chosen. Not just, God doesn't have us as family because He stuck with us, but He chose us.
Yeah.
Speaking of being chosen, another plug, go watch The Chosen.
I kind
That's
of
a plug I can get behind.
I had something else. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of thought about this earlier, but just because of God, like He saved me in that last moment when my mom could have been like, yeah, I know you're right. I just want to devote my whole life to Him. And even though I can sometimes go my own way and sometimes, push Him to the side, I kind of want to always just remember that moment, remember that, because of Him, like, I got to meet you guys and I got a chance in life, and I'm just so thankful
Absolutely.
for that.
And we got to meet you too. We're thankful for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you
Shout
for
out Lori and Jimmy.
yeah, shout out Lori and Jimmy. Also, if you guys watch the Instagram story, short version of Karleigh's story, it auto-filled the captions and totally misspelled both Karleigh's name and Lori's name. So don't go off of those spellings. But yeah, we're thank you so much for being on. Thank you for sharing your story with us. This was great. It was really powerful.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged. I'm feeling excited to go on and do other things with the rest of the day myself. So hopefully those of you listening or watching also feel encouraged. If you happen to join us at Wayfarers on a Sunday and you happen to see Karleigh, I would say you should go up to her and tell her that you appreciated hearing her story. Tell her what parts of her story you liked. I know Karleigh told me she recently binged everyone else's backstories, watched them all back to back, and really enjoyed them too. So maybe you can do that too. If this is the first one you watch, go back in the archives. We've got a few other stories. They're all really, really cool. You can hear a little bit more about the life experiences that different people that we've been involved with have had, and the really cool ways that God has been working in their lives.
We're just waiting for Nick to share his story.
Yeah.
I feel like we've heard glimpses through different sermons, but we've not had like a cohesive.
It might be coming up soon. We'll see. So there's a plug. You gotta tune in. Who knows? Maybe next time, maybe in a few weeks. You'll have to tune in and see. You might get to hear my story as well. But otherwise, we will see you guys either at church on Sunday or next week on the Deep Dive Podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Peace.